Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed, for your esteemed presentation and the fruitful discussion from all our participants. We would like to proceed to our second presentation in today's workshop. The second paper submitted is co-authored by Professor Dr. Chahir Zaki and Professor Fida Karam. However, Dr. Chahir is the presenting author today. Professor Dr. Chahir Zaki is a citizen of Egypt at present. Professor Chahir is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Economics and Political Science, Cairo University. In this position, Professor Chahir teaches and conducts research on trade policy and macroeconomics. He is also a part-time economist at the Economic Research Forum, Cairo, Egypt, and a consultant for the World Bank and the International Trade Center, Geneva. He holds a BA, Bachelor in Economics from Faculty of Economics and Political Science, Cairo University, and Master of Arts in Economics from Université Paris, Sorbonne, and a PhD in Economics from the same university, Sorbonne University. His research interests include international trade, trade policy, trade and services, applied economics, and macroeconomic modeling. He has published numerous studies in the International Trade Journal, the World Trade Review, Economic Modeling, and Applied Economics. Professor Chahir today will present his paper, Trade Volume and Economic Growth in MENA Region Goods or Services. Please, Professor Chahir, you may start.
So, thanks, Dr. Sharif, for allowing me to present this paper, and thanks also for the Egypt Scholars Economic Society for for shortlisting this paper. So I'll be presenting a paper co-authored with my colleague Fida Karam from the Gulf University for Science and Technology. It has been published in the Applied Economics Journal, and it's basically trying to examine the nexus between trade volume and economic growth, and which one is more important, whether goods or services. So just a technical question. I just want to know how to move the slide. Oh yes, it's fine. Okay. So as you can see, in the just to start with, why is this topic important? At least for two main reasons. So the first reason, from an economic point of view, there is a huge literature on the impact of trade liberalization on growth, and it has not been conclusive. So some studies found a significant impact, others didn't find this impact. But a smaller literature focused on the distinction between goods and services. From an empirical point of view, why do we focus on the MENA region? Because first, it has been neglected in the trade and growth literature, and moreover, this region has a huge competitive advantage in services, and this is why, despite the fact that it has this competitive advantage, but the services sector still faces several impediments in terms of liberalization, which is not the case of goods that experienced a significant liberalization, especially in the last 2 decades. So what we do in this paper, so basically we investigate the effects of trade and services and goods on the growth performance in the MENA region. We undertake this empirical work at 2 levels, so a first level at the macro level and a second level at the sectoral level for 21 MENA countries between 1960 and 2011. And finally, we try to decompose the GDP growth to disentangle the contribution of trade and goods versus trade and services to growth. Actually, what we found, so first, there is a clear positive association between real GDP and both service and goods trade. And 2 interesting findings. So the first one is that the marginal effect of services trade on real GDP actually decreases as trading goods increases, despite the fact that the overall positive effect of trade and services on real GDP. and this, I mean, is mainly attributed to the fact that the services sector is still facing several impediments in terms of standards and norms in the MENA region. And finally, when we decompose the GDP growth with different components, investment, human capital, and so on and so forth, we found that there is a greater contribution of goods trade to the GDP growth compared to the one of trade and services, and even greater than the one of the contribution of tertiary enrollment, which measures human capital. And actually, this is mainly again explained by the fact that the commitments of the MENA region at the WTO and the liberalization of services is still lower than the goods one. So I'll just present some stylized facts, then move quickly to the methodology and the empirical results, what we found in terms of the decomposition of the GDP growth, and I will conclude. So as you can see, the GDP growth in the MENA region has been following the world growth in terms of its cyclicality, in terms of booms and busts. And this is mainly explained by first, so the trade in the MENA region, which is, if measured as share to GDP, is substantially high. That's one point. And the second point, given that the growth in the MENA region is mainly driven by oil prices, given the important proven oil reserves and oil exports coming out from the MENA region, making the correlation between the MENA region growth and the world growth highly positive. And then if we move to the, as I mentioned before, if we compare the share of trade to GDP and the share of services trade to GDP, we can find that the share of trade is significantly higher than the one of services. And actually, this points out the fact that trade and services in the MENA region is still facing several impediments, even, if we compare it to other regions, especially when we take the ratio between total trade and services. If we have a look at the country level, we can see also a similar observation, which is that most of the countries, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Tunisia as well, they liberalized their goods much more than their services, leading to greater trade in goods rather than trade in services, despite the fact that they have a competitive advantage in this sector. Then, by just observing a simple correlation between growth and trade in goods and versus trade in services, we can see that there is a slight positive correlation between them. So if we here, as you can see, on the x-axis we have the average growth of goods, and on the y-axis we have the average GDP growth, and we can see that there is a positive correlation between them, which is also the case for trade in services. Okay. So this is regarding the main stylized facts that we observed in our paper. Then I'm going to move to the methodology and the data, but I have a problem in moving the slides. I don't know why. Yes, here it is. So in terms of methodology, as I mentioned before, we have we've estimated a growth regression following the seminal paper of Mankey, Romer, and Vail of 1992, that introduced in a solo model different variables. So we run the same regression, the same growth model at two levels, at the macroeconomic level and the sectoral level. Our dependent variable is the GDP, real GDP, and our variables of interest are both real trade in goods and real trade in services, and then we introduce a bunch of control variables I mean, that have been introduced in this literature, such as investment measuring physical capital, school enrollment measuring human capital, the population growth, land to have, I mean, a comprehensive factors of production framework. And then we introduce our two main variables of interest, which are the services, trade and services, and then the trading goods. Later, we interact trading goods with trade and services in order to disentangle the marginal impact of services when trading goods increases on growth. Given the importance of oil, we also introduce an oil dummy, and we interact this oil dummy with both trade in goods and trade in services. So this is the macroeconomic level. As for the sectoral level, we run this regression at the three sectors level, agriculture, industry, and services for our 21 countries. And we introduce just a dummy whether the trade is services or not, as you can see here, which is the dummy variable serve. We interact this dummy variable with the variable trade, and again we introduce an oil dummy to control for oil exporters in the MENA region. Our data come mainly from the World Development Indicators of the World Bank, and for the trade and services we used mainly also I mean the disaggregation from the World Development Indicators between 1960 and 2011. For the empirical results, so as you can see in table 3, we have, I mean, some classical results in terms of investment, population growth, schooling. So investment is positive and significant, schooling is positive and significant as well, and both trading goods and trading services, they are positive and highly significant regardless the way we estimate the equations. I mean, whether we use random effects, fixed effects, or even the dynamic panel using the Arellano bond technique. When we interact goods and services, we found also a negative and significant impact, showing that the higher the trading goods, the lower the marginal effect of trading goods on growth when trade and services increase. And this is clear in figure 5, as you can see here. There is, the greater trading goods, the lower the marginal effect of trade and services on GDP. And this is mainly attributed to the restrictiveness that we have in several services sector in terms of norms and standards, especially in the financial services, in telecommunication, and so on and so forth. The same conclusion holds when we use a more disaggregated level for the sectoral results. And if we decompose the GDP, so we can see that mainly, as you can see here, the contribution of trade in goods and trade in services to growth, especially for goods, is much greater than for services. And even during the financial crisis, the contribution of trade in goods was highly negative in 2009, as you can see here in figure 6. But the services sector, given that its level is lower, so its variation also was lower. If we observe this at the country level, a consistent result, across the board for most of the countries, is that trading goods contributes more than trading services to growth, and except for Lebanon, given its comparative advantage in financial services. So here, this is the estimated contribution of trading services and trading goods. So here we use, the classical way of computing things here, where we have the growth rate for each variable. We have the estimated coefficient for each variable. So we multiply the growth rate by the coefficient, and then we determine the share of, we calculate the share of this multiplication to the total growth rate of the variable. And we can see here that the share of goods and services is as high as investment, and even much greater than schooling. And this is, I mean, consistent for most of the periods and for most of the estimation techniques. I will skip the country results for time constraint. So to conclude, our main results show there is a positive association between GDP and both trade in goods and trade in services. As I mentioned, there is the marginal effect of trade and services on real GDP decreases as trade in goods increases, despite, I mean, the overall positive impact of trade in services. And as I mentioned, there is a greater contribution of trade in goods compared to trade in services, and even more than investment and more than tertiary enrollment. So from a policy standpoint, clearly the MENA region has still a long way in order to have a more integrated and a more liberalized services sector. I mean, it's more difficult to liberalize services because it's not just a tariff that we're going to decrease, but it's a whole bunch of norms and standards that should be harmonized and allied to the international standards, and to make the trade, I mean the MENA region, benefiting more from its competitive advantage in these sectors. And I will stop here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Professor Chahir, for this themed presentation. Any of the participants who would like to ask a question or would like to add a comment, please raise your hand or write in the chat box. I guess Professor Hisham is not raising his hand. We have a question from, but please, everyone who asked a question and raised his hand in the previous presentation, could you please press the raise your hand button one again to lower your hand, so I would not miss whoever has asked before with whoever wants to ask a question again. Yes, so we have Dr. Rasha from Helwan University. Please, you may start.
Okay, first of all, presentation. First of all, in the model, you have interaction between the dummy variable and the other variable, I think dummy trait. Why you choose dummy variable trait? Only dummy variable and the trait, ignoring the other variables. I think in the slide, presenting the coefficients, the land coefficient is 0.00, what it represents, and how we could explain the zero land coefficient. Thank you.
Okay, so just for the first question regarding the dummy question, actually I introduced only the oil dummy and I interacted with the trade variable. So the trade variable is not a discrete variable, it's not, I mean, a binary variable, it's a continuous variable with the value of trade at the sectoral level in equation 2. And then I interacted with the oil dummy just to see to what extent the effect of trade changes when the country is an oil exporter compared to an oil importer. So this is for the first question. For the second question, and again, I mean, it's the same thing in the first regression as well. And for the second question regarding the land coefficient, actually we introduced land just to have, I mean, a comprehensive growth equation with different factors of production. So we have capital measured by investment, we have human capital measured by schooling, we have the population growth, which I mean is a classical variable in such models, and we have land as well, which measures the scarcity of a limited factor of production. Its coefficient is very low because actually in the literature, the effect of land on growth has not been very conclusive. Some studies found positive, some studies found negative, given its scarcity. In our study, we found its effect was not that robust, but in general, we can say that, I mean, we cannot claim that it's usually significant, because as you can see in the fixed effect and the Arellano bond, the land is not significant, and its coefficient is very low. And even when it's significant, the value of the coefficient is very low. So one of the reasons behind this might be related, I mean, to the scarcity of land, and especially of the arable land, because this variable measures only arable land in the MENA region. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chahir. Professor Hisham, you would like to ask a question or a comment? Please, you may start.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Chahir, for your presentation. I have maybe 4 or 5 questions. The first one is, you mentioned that you will use argument growth model, but I found that your dependent variable is just log of RGDP. I think it's better to use a change in RGDP or growth rate in RGDP. I need to listen to your answer about this one. Second one is, may I ask you a silly question? RGDP, as you know, consists of CIG and NX. So trade in goods and services are part in RGDP. So when we make a regression between the two variables, RGDP and NX, surely we will find that the good relationship between them. So what is your paper adds? The second one. Third one is about results in table 5A and 5B. Did you get this results from panel data regression or for just country regression? The fourth question is, you divide your period into two periods. One of them is between 2000 and 2010. 2010 included the global financial crisis. So what did you do to avoid the effect of this financial crisis on your data? Last one is, you have 13 explanatory variables, which is too much. So what's your answer about that? It's better to divide your regression into 2 or 3 equations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hisham. Shahir, please.
So for the first question, we used the log GDP, not the growth rate, because actually we wanted to have the elasticity of each of those components to the level of GDP, not the growth rate. So that's the first one. And again, the difference, I mean, in log measures growth rates. Second, for the second question, when I is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M, yes, I agree with you, but I remind you here that we're not estimating an identity for at least 3 reasons. So first, because we're not introducing neither consumption nor government, so it's not an identity. Second, there is no inventories because we're just including the gross fixed capital formation, not capitalization. And third, we're controlling also, I mean, as it was well documented, starting, I mean, the paper of Mankey, Romer, and Vail that improved Solo's model. We introduce other variables to avoid, I mean, such national accounts identity by introducing the population growth, schooling, and so on and so forth. So this is not clearly, I mean, an identity. And for the financial crisis, actually, in the paper we introduced year dummies in different regression to control for any specific I mean year event. So clearly the dummy for 2008 controls for the financial crisis. And I think that's it. If or perhaps I might missed something.
No, thank you very much. Good answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chahir. We have the last question from Dr. Hussein from Ain Shams University. Please.
First of all, I want to thank Dr. Chahir for his well-prepared presentation and selecting the topic. I have first comments and some questions. For oil dummy variables included in this model, I think it could be also explaining what we can call it the supply-side shocks. Also, for the slide number 33, when we are returning to this slide, we can see that the trade to GDP ratio in MENA countries in 2010 is higher than all other regions all over the world. However, this is unexpected. But I want to ask if this is returning to the financial crisis and its impact or the small impact on the MENA region or not. This is the first question. The second, for the measure of the investment, I think INV is an abbreviation for the investment. I want to sure this is in real term or not, and what is the measure used here? Is it the fixed capital accumulation or not? And after this, for the normality and heteroscedasticity test, I can't see it. However, we can't do any statistical inference without testing for these. So how can we depend on the model if we can't know the normality and the heteroscedasticity? Finally, thank you again, Dr. Chahir.
So thanks, Dr. Hussein, for your questions. Just to start with, for the first question, the share of trade in the MENA region is clearly, high, as you can see in the slide. But this is actually attributed to the low level of GDP compared to other regions. Given the fact that here trade is computed by the fact that we have exports plus imports over GDP, so the ratio between total exports and imports over GDP is high, and this is clearly due first to the low level of GDP in the MENA region, and second to the high level of imports of the MENA region, given that here trade incorporates both goods and exports and imports. For the second question, yes, investment is measured in real term. It's the gross fixed capital formation. That we computed from the World Development Indicators, and we deflated all the variables using the CPI of with the base year 2005 to have real variables for all our variables. And finally, the regressions have been run, using robust standard errors to avoid any heteroscedasticity, even though we don't have a huge heteroscedasticity in our variables, given the fact that we have only a MENA region and most of the variables are relatively not that variant. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Sharif, I just have something to say to everyone. Besides thanking you all for your great discussions and presentations, I've got 3 colleagues here at Swansea University who are actually attending this workshop from my account. So one of my colleagues now, he's interested to ask a question to Dr. Chahir. My colleague is Dr. Ahmed Abadi, who works for the Central Bank in Saudi Arabia. So I'm going to pass the mic to him to ask Dr. Chahir his question. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. That was a great presentation. Thank you, Dr. Chahir. My question might stem from the fact that I haven't dealt with the methodology of the GMM before. So my question is, does this methodology account for structural breaks, given that in the stylized facts you mentioned that there was a periods of liberalization and freeing of trade, So there might have been a structural change in the flow of trade across countries. So does the methodology account for structural breaks? Thank you.
Shall I respond now or?
Yes, please.
Okay. So actually, we didn't test for structural breaks, but as I previously mentioned, what we did is that we introduced year dummies in our regression, but we didn't in the empirical part we didn't split our sample into different periods. We only did this when we computed the contribution of trade services and trade goods to the GDP growth of different countries.
Thank you so much. The other question that I have is, given the fact that the MENA countries have different economic structures, you have lumped, you gathered, you put in your analysis of the whole MENA countries. Some of them are oil-driven economies and oil-dependent, and some of them are not. They might be more of like a service and tourism dependent or whatever. So my question is, do you account for the fact that your sample is not a homogeneous grouping? Thank you.
Yes, in fact, we did this by at least 3 ways. So first, given the fact that we have a we were using fixed effects model, and even for the dynamic panel, so we're controlling for any unobserved heterogeneity in our estimation. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we introduced also an oil dummy to make sure that we have this clear distinction between oil exporters and oil importers. Because as you mentioned, this is an important aspect of the MENA region. And finally, we tried also to introduce those control variables such as population growth, schooling, investment, which are relatively, which capture different aspects of the countries that we have in the data set. And as I mentioned before, we estimated this using robust standard errors technique in order to avoid any heteroscedasticity that we might have in our sample.
Well, that explains a lot. Thank you so much, Chahir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chahir. Thank you all for your questions. If there are any other questions, please raise your hands. And if you don't have any question, please lower down your hands. Okay, if there is the case, thank you again, Professor Chahir, for this esteemed presentation. Thank you all for this discussion, and let us proceed, please, to our final presentation today by Dr. Raji El-Ragas, if I'm pronouncing it right. Dr. Raji El-Ragas is the head of the World Trade Organization unit in the Ministry of Agriculture in Saudi Arabia. He is near to completion of his PhD degree in economics from Swansea University in the United Kingdom. His research interest includes economic growth, development, and international trade. He is also an active member of a number of professional associations as the Saudi Economic Association, the American Economic Association, and Agriculture and Applied Economic Association. Dr. Raji will present his paper today, Trade Openness and Economic Growth in MENA Region. Please, Dr. Raji, you may start.